You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with Kyle Peter. He's an adventure racer who has competed in over 140 adventure races since 2003. He speaks to me about how he got into the sport, about his team, and their recent race in Australia for the World Championships, where they came in second place after 630 kilometers of racing over 4 days. I hope you enjoy. Kyle, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Thanks. So why don't we start off with your athletic background? How did you get into adventure racing?
Well, I started off, as a typical American playing all the ball sports, wrestling, that sort of thing. But I quickly, I don't want to say got bored, but I quickly really gravitated towards more outdoor adventures. So I was doing backpacking trips, canoe trips, kind of just getting outdoors and camping. And then I got into things like dog sledding and rock climbing and more unique things. And when I was doing those things, I always wanted to push myself harder, see more, go further. So I kind of was realizing towards the end of high school that if I got fit, I could push myself further and see more and be more comfortable out there. So when I went to college, I joined the crew team and the cycling team and was just really enjoying being fit and being outside. And it wasn't until I saw a program called the Eco Challenge. I don't know if you've seen that or any of your viewers have seen that, but it was pretty much the original reality television produced by Mark Burnett, who does The Survivor and The Apprentice and many reality TV shows. And he essentially created adventure races that were designed for TV. They had elite teams racing for the podium, but they also had kind of more interest teams. I know people are probably familiar with watching the Hawaii Ironman. They have the front of the race, and they also have kind of the interest racers as well. So it really caught my attention, and I think a lot of people know about the sport, got into the sport today because of these Eco Challenge races. And I basically saw it, and I said, I want to do that, and I want to do it to the best of my abilities.
What was your first race? I mean, I guess you don't jump in and go and do an expedition length adventure race to begin with. At least I assume you don't. But did you start off with kind of a sprint or shorter race and then work your way up? How did that progress?
So many folks have just jumped into a really long race, and an expedition race is any race that's 3 days or longer. But in my case, I quickly got on the internet, and it was a lot easier getting into this in the 2000s compared to a lot of older folks that got into it kind of before the internet and had to figure all this out without. But of course I searched, and I found a couple looking for a teammate. It's a team sport, usually co-ed teams of 3 or 4. And I got into a race that was just a couple hours. And by the end of that year, we had done our first 24-hour length race. And in the second year, I did my first 3-day race. And now, 12 years later, I've done over 35 expedition length races.
Wow. So you went all in. I think I read on your bio that you've done over 140 adventure races in total or more. And I mean, that's impressive. So you've, since '03, have really kind of embraced the sport and obviously really enjoy it, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a huge part of my life. And it's not just something that, I do, my local marathon or my local 10K, around Thanksgiving or something like that. It's something that every day, I wake up early, get in a training session, whether it's a run, a bike, a kayak, strength training. Then on the weekends, of course, it's longer exercises. So, I almost view running and hiking as two separate sports. Because when you're racing, over 600-kilometer length courses like we just finished a couple weeks ago in Australia, you're not running, and you're definitely not running uphill the whole time. So there's quite a bit of hiking involved because the races are self-supported. You need to carry all your own food. You need to carry your own water or find your own water out there in the wild, as well as safety gear. Sometimes that means tents and sleeping bags. oftentimes it just means a little emergency survival blanket.
Right, right. So you mentioned before, so let's dig into what exactly adventure racing is for those not familiar with it. So you mentioned it's a team sport. So and you said a co-ed team sport. So let's talk about your team. So you're on Team Adventure Medical Kits. Describe that team for me. How was it kind of formed and constructed, and what are the teammates like? I mean, what is the makeup in terms of strength? So you obviously need navigational skills and athletic skills and backcountry skills. So how do you form a team, and how does your team look?
Yeah, so like I said, it's really easy to find your local area's kind of adventure racing club, meet some people that way. But I think some of the most successful and enjoyable experiences are when you grab your buddies, you don't know what you're doing, you figure it out, you show up at a race, whether it's kind of a beginner friendly, maybe half day type race, 6 to 12 hour type race, which might seem super long if you're thinking of doing a half Ironman or an Ironman, but you got to remember you're navigating through these courses, so they're not quite as high intensity. So yeah, you need a navigator on your team. The navigator on our team, his name's Rob Preston, and he lives near Melbourne, Australia. So we are an international team, and we focus on the World Series and the World Championships race every year. But of course we race domestically, and for those races I do the navigation. So we're a co-ed team of 4. We usually have 2 or 3 of us that can do the navigation, but you typically have a chief or lead navigator. The co-ed bit of it is typically you'll see 1 female and 3 males, but that's not always the case. I've had a lot of success racing with 2 ladies and 2 guys. There's different dynamics there. Off the bat, folks think, and most of the time it's true, that the ladies aren't quite as fast or as strong as the guys. But that all changes when you're, 24 hours, 2 days into a race. And oftentimes the ladies can be much stronger than the guys. And our teammate, Mary Chandler, is a phenomenal athlete. She carries all her own weight. She pushes the team, and she adds quite a bit in terms of logistics and planning to our team. And that's another big part of it. For a 4-day race, we basically have a little bit of a flow chart of how the race works just a day or 2 before, and we need to plan all of our resupply, food, shoes, clothing that go into 3 or 4 different bins. And we see those bins at different points along the course. And it can get pretty logistically complicated if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to finish this trekking leg and my shoes are going to go into box B, but then the next trekking leg, we're going to see box C, so we need a second pair there. And basically, you don't want to come off a bike leg and not have running shoes and need to do, a 12-hour trek in your biking shoes.
Yeah. That'd be a bad planning mistake and a disaster, I would suppose.
Oh, it's terrible. But it really shows you kind of the true essence of the sport and what it is. It's teamwork and rallying together and kind of getting it done, kind of that getting it done attitude. With these races, it's not always, the fittest and the strongest that win, but oftentimes it's the smartest and the teams that can work the best together.
Right.
Kind of the next piece is oftentimes they call it the mule. And it's essentially a teammate that can carry some extra weight, maybe carry some extra team food, carry that team tent, carry the team first aid kit. And their job is to keep up and maybe grab someone's pack if someone's having a bad day or needs a little bit of a break, set the pace, go out front, because that takes a burden to be out front and setting the pace. It's a lot easier to drop in and just stare at someone's heels or get a draft on the bike. And so, those are kind of the main roles of a team. And then I guess I forgot myself as captain. It's mostly, a big part of it is pre-race logistics, working with the sponsors. As much as we race, we can't do it out of pocket. This year we did 4 international expedition races. We were in Belize, New Zealand. We did a World Series race in Wyoming. We were in China, and then we just finished the World Championships in Australia. So, you can imagine the airfare for 4 people, plus a 5th media person to a lot of those races. And then the entry fees, we're talking $4,000 to $8,000 for each race.
Oh, wow.
So it's not cheap. Yeah. So managing all those logistics is a big part of my job. So yeah, we're not even really talking about the fun part of the sport yet. And you can see it's pretty complex and involved. And because of that, really the best teams out there have quite a bit of experience.
Right. And I guess this is sort of one of those sports, and there's a lot of sports like this where the really competitive elite teams like your team can really focus on those global events and deal with that. But for someone who doesn't have the resources or means to do that, but still want to be in the sport, there are plenty of local races in different countries in the U.S. and elsewhere that they can compete in and be able to try adventure racing, right? It's an accessible sport. Obviously there's a lot of equipment and stuff like that, but it doesn't require traveling around the world unless you're at that top level, right?
No, essentially what you need is a mountain bike and a pair of shoes. The boats are most often provided. It's probably, if you're looking at a hierarchy of what sport to train, it's at the bottom, at least for racing locally. It's usually the shortest leg. And all you need to do is just hop on the internet and search U.S. adventure racing. There's a U.S. ARA, U.S. Adventure Racing Association, that puts out a calendar, and you'll be able to find a race probably within 100, 200 miles of where you live and get some buddies together. And entry fees are probably, $100 to $200 each, and you go out and have a great time.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about some of your adventures. So you mentioned the Adventure Racing World Series Championship in Australia. Your team came in second place after 4 days of intense racing. So there's a lot to that race. Maybe we can start to walk through it a little bit and just talk about some of the key legs and things. And I understand, obviously, there's the kayaking and mountain biking and caving and trekking and all that kind of stuff that was involved in it. But talk a little bit about, overall, I mean, what was that race like? What was the key to getting to second place? What were the differentiators? And maybe just walk us through, like I said, some of the legs to give us a feel for what it would be like to take on something so large.
Sure, yeah. So we've been attending the World Championships for 5 or 6 years now. We've gotten as best as third place before in Costa Rica about 3 or 4 years ago. So this second place finish was a big deal for us. We wanted to improve upon that third place. Ultimately, our goal was to win the race. But there's a team from New Zealand that has won the race 3 times in a row, and they've won it a few times before that. So they're kind of like that powerhouse Dynasty type team that's many see as the unbeatable team. So we set out our goal to beat them. We haven't done it yet, but we're not over. So yeah, kind of working backwards. We really wanted to dial in, all of our gear, our nutrition, and of course, probably the most important aspect to these races is the navigation. So the morning of the race, we had about 2 hours, and we had, I think, around 40 some maps to basically plot our route. So the courses are unmarked. Essentially, what we need to do is hit checkpoints along the way. And all the checkpoints are laid out for you on the map, and you get to pick your own route between. Sometimes it's straightforward, like, we take, this trail to the top of the mountain to get the checkpoint. Sometimes it's a little more open to route choice. You could take a trail around, you could bushwhack straight up, all different options. So that is also very important in racing is picking the best route and picking the best route for your team's strengths. So the course started with a beautiful paddle in Jervis Bay, which they say they have the whitest beaches in the world. And it was definitely beautiful. There were whales and dolphins and huge sea cliffs. And we had a good start. It was a Le Mans style start. And we ran pretty hard. And, people often joke, why are you sprinting at the start of a 600-kilometer race?
Yeah.
But it's really important. Similar to ITU triathlon, you need to have a really good bike or a really good swim so you can get in a good position on the bike and then go off and have a good run. So we wanted to get into the wake of a strong kayaking team. We've worked really hard at our kayaking over the past few years, but we're still a touch off the top kayaking teams in the World Series. Fortunately, we had a good start, and we were able to sit in the wake of the best paddling teams, which worked really well. We collected checkpoints to get us around this bay. We got out in a big group. It was probably the top 10 teams were essentially all together.
How many teams total in the race?
This was the largest expedition adventure race ever. There were 94 teams.
Oh, wow.
That started. Yeah, so that's nearly 400 racers. And then leg 2 was kind of just a transition leg where we coast steered, which is basically running down the coast. So sand, some sand running, some rock hopping, a little bit of swimming, and ran over to another lake for leg 3, which was a short, just a couple hour paddle in this lake where the sun set on day 1. And from there, we had an all-night bike ride to get us further south down the coast.
And what is that bike ride like? Is that a single track mountain bike, rough road, or is it more straightforward? I mean, explain that.
Yeah, so in adventure racing, you can get anything from boring pavement to an epic single track, and it really depends on the location of the race. So if we're heading to a race in the Front Range of Colorado, we're expecting some pretty fun single track.
Right.
Internationally, single track is not as popular in a lot of the developing countries we race in. Sometimes you get really nice treats, like racing in South Africa. A lot of the main tracks between small villages are epic single tracks, and they're not meant to, be that, but they just work out that way, and it's great. In Australia here, we had a bit of 2-track, mostly dirt roads, and not a lot of pavement. So, but these dirt roads can be complex, especially racing in any type of area where there's logging. These logging roads can pop up and disappear overnight, and you're working on a map that's 20, 30 years old, sometimes even older.
Right.
So the navigation became pretty tricky in here, and this was the first kind of selection of the race. So like I said, we're all this big group, a top 10, doesn't really matter what place you're in. You can have a fast transition and come out in second, but then have a slower one, be back in 10th. It doesn't matter. So this leg had a number of tricky junctions. It was essentially you'd see a fork in the road, and when you're racing at pace and at night, it's hard to tell exactly which junction you're at, and it's fairly flat. So it's not like, we need to climb that mountain. So it was unclear, but Rob did an amazing job through there, and we actually finished that leg right before sunrise in second place, 5 minutes behind the leader.
Oh, wow. I was just going to say that navigation lands up being a key differentiator on a leg like that, right?
Oh, exactly. So the teams behind us, not only are they more mentally fatigued, they're also doing more miles. Every wrong turn, it adds up. And I often say in adventure racing, the term "the rich get richer," but in adventure racing, the fast get faster. Those teams that move through there faster, we have more favorable tides for the next leg, whether paddling or coast steering. And then there's also what we call dark zones in adventure racing, where it's a period where you're not allowed to progress at night. So whitewater rafting, maybe a rock climbing section, anything that's too dangerous to travel at night, you get stopped. But if a team ahead of you makes it through there in the daylight, they keep racing while you have to wait.
Oh, okay.
Your only benefit is extra rest, but the clock never stops in adventure racing. So whenever you decide to sleep, the clock's still ticking. And if you get hit in one of these dark zones, the fast get faster and they leave you. And that's often what's been our downfall in previous races, is we've kind of been the top of the chase group that gets stuck in these dark zones. And this race did have a dark zone coming up on day 3 for that night. We didn't want to get stuck in it, so we're very conscious of that. We wanted to stay with the leaders. And this next leg was a 40-some kilometer coast steering leg along these beautiful sandy beaches. But there's quite a bit of choice of when to stay inland on the trails and when to stay on the coast. and you had to judge the tide. You had to judge how fast you could move in the sand. And we had an okay leg there. I think we finished still in second place, but in that next transition, there was loads of teams coming in behind us. So we weren't comfortable yet, that's for sure, in our position.
As we go through the race, I mean, and you said that obviously if you get to a dark zone and get shut out, that's a rest opportunity. But what was your team's sleep plan for this? I mean, it was 4 days, so you need some level of sleep. So what was the plan, and did that plan actually take place, and did it pay off?
Yeah, I think one big differentiating fact between a team that's going to finish on a podium at a race like this and a team that's going to struggle is knowing their abilities, building a plan to match their abilities, and then enacting the plan. So our plan, which I don't think is too different from most of the top teams, but we aim to not sleep on night one, and then we aim to get 2 to 3 hours of sleep every night thereafter. And then, of course, the last night of the race, depending on how much race is left after that last night, we might skip it. We might take a shorter rest. We kind of play that one by ear. But we also have to plan with those different bins where we want our warm sleeping gear. So in this race, we actually stuck 100% to our sleep plan. And things worked out pretty well that way. So now we're in day 2. We had a large upriver paddle that took us pretty close to sunset. And we're starting to feel the fatigue. It is very common in this race because we had boats that were a little tippier and narrower than normal, but racers would literally fall asleep while paddling and fall off into the water.
Oh, wow.
And, it sounds so crazy, like how can someone fall asleep while kayaking? But it's a very rhythmic motion, and you're sitting down, so you're more relaxed than you would be maybe running, and especially when the fatigue sets in, you're not engaging your core muscles, your leg muscles as much as you would be if it was a 10K sprint paddle. And so, your mind starts to drift off, the eyes close for a bit, and you can fall asleep that easily. So we call that the sleep monsters, and that's just this undeniable force that's telling you to lay down on the side of the trail and close your eyes, and it's all you want to do, and it takes every bit of your strength to keep your eyes open and keep pushing.
Oh, yeah. I've been there, not in adventure racing, but in other things. I know exactly how that is. I think most people do. It's terrible. It's like, why will my body not let me stay awake?
There's a big balance between sleeping too much and letting your competitors get away, not sleeping enough and making stupid mistakes, or struggling with sleep monsters, and it just kills your pace.
Right.
So we came in, a lot of these race recaps. So, we did a big bike ride, then we did a big trek, and essentially that's how it went. But there's a few defining legs, and typically these long adventure races will have kind of a classic long trek leg, and it's in these long trekking legs where real gaps are formed, and it's essentially comes down to navigation, and when you're 2 days into a race, how efficient and how fast can you move through a 12-hour trekking leg. And a 12-hour trekking leg for us is typically a 24-hour trekking leg for the last place team.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, do you account how much of that is, you said navigation, but how much of that is also fitness and training to be able to move at those speeds?
So I would say there's kind of a prerequisite training and fitness that the top teams have, and so that's what makes a real big difference between the 12 and 24 hour. But a lot of it just comes down to efficiency. So we never stop the forward progress. If someone needs to go to the bathroom, they run ahead on the trail, do what they got to do. We come and catch up. They get ready. They join us. So we're always moving forward.
Yeah.
If we do make a mistake, oh shoot, we were supposed to take a right at that last junction. It's like immediate turn around, run back, keep going. No one's complaining. But from what I understand, kind of those back marker teams, they might take breaks every hour, sit down on the trail and have a snack, whereas we're eating from our side access pockets on our backpacks constantly. So I think a lot of that is really the big difference. So yeah, that is fitness too, to be able to push continually for 12 hours.
Right. And so in terms of the other defining legs of this race, I mean, what else would you say? Anything interesting or unusual about this race compared to other ones? I did read on the description there was a caving element. I mean, what was involved in that?
Yeah, so caving was slightly unique. I've done it in a handful of races, but pretty much when you come to a race area, whatever is a unique feature or unique activity there, they like to incorporate into the race. And so we had this caving section that, to be honest, I thought it was going to be like a tourist cave, walk down a staircase with your headlamp, take a look at some stalactites, find a checkpoint right in a big, opening. But these were technical caves, and the most technical part about it was actually finding the cave. So there were, we had to go to 5 of 6 caves, and when you find a cave out in the woods, it's essentially, a hole no bigger than like 12-inch diameter in a pile of rocks.
Right.
And we were doing this at night, so and we had a map that was, essentially a cartoon drawing of this area. So it was really challenging for Rob to get his head around this map. And, we just had woken up from a nap, and Rob started walking, 90 degrees from where he was supposed to walk because the map wasn't positioned to north, which is common for maps, especially, professional maps. So, we had to sort that out. And then when we actually got to the cave, the first cave we got to, we learned quickly that our teammate Eric was claustrophobic. We didn't know that. We're like, well, how are we going to handle this? He was on the border of a little panic attack in there as things tightened up. And these caves were tight. I mean, one cave was called the Flattener. And I mean, it was literally pressing me on my back and my chest as I squeezed through with the guidance of Mary telling me how to position myself to get through. I'm the biggest guy in the team. So yeah, it was exciting, and it was a real challenge, and definitely a place where, race time could be made or lost. Even though they tried to make it an off the clock experience, they said everybody has, they have to spend 5 hours at the cave. Well, we slept for a couple hours, and then we went caving, and the caving took us 4 hours. So we were at 6 hours. So there wasn't really this off the clock time. We still needed to hustle through this section.
Right. So one last question on this race or in general. I mean, you said there's this Dynasty unbeatable team that came in first place. I mean, from your take, what do you think makes them that Dynasty? I mean, you've mentioned fitness, navigation, planning, teamwork, but what is their differentiating factor, if you know it, that puts them on top?
Yeah, so 2 things. One is navigation for sure. Their navigator is amazing. He's the best navigator in the sport. And the second thing is experience. They've done a number of races. Their captain actually raced in that race that I saw on TV back in 2002. So before I knew about the sport, he was winning races. Right.
So he's been known in the sport for a long time.
Exactly. And so normally they just obliterate the field. And for us in the second to last transition area with 12 hours left to go in the race, we were in the same transition area with them. We said hello to them, and they're doing their race and we're doing our race, but there's no doubt about it that, they feel our pressure there, and they're not used to that.
Right.
And so, it's a big eye opener for us, because a lot of the race is mental, and a lot of folks talk about visualizations, positivity. And for us as a team to see that, it tells us that we know we can win this race. 3 years ago, it might have been more of a dream, but now it's a reality that we know that we have what it takes, all those skills that we've been talking about, to win this race. And we ended up just over 2 hours behind them. And that hasn't been done before. So we're really proud of that. And we're really excited for next year's World Championships, which is a bit early. It's in August this year in Wyoming at the Cowboy Tough Adventure Race.
Cool. Well, congratulations on that second place finish. I mean, that's it sounds like an amazingly challenging race and great outcome. So, and I agree. I mean, now you're within that reach and you can feel it, so that now you can take it to that next level. We're almost out of time, so let me end with one final question, and it's a big question. So, you don't need to go into every detail, but from a training and workout perspective, for someone who is looking to get into this sport, and maybe not at that expedition level, but I mean, what is your your week look like in terms of training? Because you've got technical skills, physical fitness, and other elements to this. So what does a typical week or training plan look like in adventure racing?
I mean, the sport is really combination triathlon, but substitute a paddle for the swim, and outdoor adventures. So if you're already an outdoor person, you like to go out on the weekends and do some hiking and do some exploring, do some rock climbing, do some skiing, mountaineering, whatever, that's all training for the sport. And so essentially what my training looks like is I probably train like a triathlete during the week. And on the weekend, I'm doing the long run, I'm doing the long ride, I'm doing the long paddle. But I might try to get up. So I live in Northern California near San Francisco. So I might get up in the Sierras once or twice a month and get out in the mountains, get off trail. And really those are things that are fun for me that I can do with a girlfriend, with buddies that maybe aren't adventure racers. So yeah, I combine that triathlon training, maybe do some strength training. CrossFit's pretty popular. I enjoy a couple days a week of CrossFit, keeps the knees healthy for all the downhill running. Sign up for your local 50K race, trail races. I bike with the local road racing kind of guys. That keeps me really fit riding the road bike. And then, yeah, on the weekends, go for a longer mountain bike ride with my buddies. So it's totally a lifestyle. You could be more disciplined with intervals or less disciplined and just have a good time. And either way, whatever's going to get you out there and get you fit is going to be the best training.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I love your description of the training in terms of it having a triathlon element and an ultra running element and a mountain biking piece and all that kind of thing, because, a lot of the listeners to this podcast are people who do other things. They don't know adventure racing or not familiar with it or just, don't do it. And to your point, it sort of fits within that lifestyle. So it's something that people should look into more because it has that adventure element that may not be there in certain triathlons, but has the same skill set to a certain extent. Obviously have to learn more and develop navigation and planning and that kind of thing, but that's part of the fun, I suppose. So, Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing about that race in Australia. I mean, that amazing outcome for your team. So congratulations. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. It's been good chatting.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.